Merry Christmas to everyone, and boy oh boy, we got some Christmas news coming out the Caitlin Clark pipeline. Now I had to stop the Christmas festivities right in the studio just to make this video for you guys. And I'm here to tell you, news is coming out of Nike.
Christmas Day was supposed to be silent, but instead it became the day the future of basketball business blinked first. And Caitlin Clark didn't even need to take a shot for the entire industry to feel it. Christmas Day 2024 should have been empty in the content world, a dead zone where timelines slow down and attention drifts toward family, food, and tradition. But instead, one sneaker insider cracked the seal on a story that had been quietly fermenting inside Nike's vaults. And the moment the words Caitlin Clark's signature shoe and spring release hit the air, the basketball ecosystem shifted. Because this wasn't just a release date leak, it was a strategy reveal, a confirmation that Nike wasn't reacting to Caitlin Clark's rise, it was orchestrating it with surgical patience. And when that short, deceptively playful commercial dropped, the one framed as casual trash talk, the one where disbelief melts into inevitability, the one where she can't make it from there becomes from anywhere, it wasn't selling footwear, it was selling inevitability, mythology, permanence, the idea that distance no longer matters, not on the court and not in culture, because that phrase doesn't just describe logo threes, it describes market reach, global relevance, and the quiet confidence of a brand that knows exactly what it's doing. And the real tell wasn't what Nike showed but what it deliberately withheld, because there was no shoe close-up, no tech breakdown, no outsole flex, no price whisper, only belief. And belief is the most expensive thing you can sell if you're planning to sell it for a decade, not a season. And that's why the Spring 2026 timeline is the most important detail in this entire saga. Because on the surface it looks like hesitation, like delay, like Nike dragging its feet while fans beg for product. But in reality it's the opposite. It's Nike admitting that women's basketball signatures are no longer experiments. They are investments that must be insulated from failure, protected from hype volatility, and launched into an ecosystem that can actually sustain demand, because Nike has already paid the tuition on rushing women's basketball shoes to market. They've watched initial sellouts collapse into restock chaos, watched momentum die when marketing budgets evaporated after week one, watched consumers get frustrated when international distribution lagged behind domestic buzz, and they're not repeating that mistake with Caitlin Clark. Not when her cultural footprint is already larger than most active players regardless of gender. Not when her highlights generate organic impressions that brands usually spend 9 figures to manufacture. And that's why waiting until she's completed 2 full WNBA seasons matters so much. Because by spring 2026 the rookie noise is gone, the manufactured rivalries have burned out, the fatigue cycles have reset, and what remains is credibility, playoff scars, leadership growth, and a player whose resume no longer needs protection, only amplification. And Nike understands something crucial here that most critics miss entirely. Hype can be rented, but credibility must be owned. And Caitlin Clark is in the process of owning hers. In real time, through performance, through patience, through resilience in the face of a league that sometimes struggled to carry the weight of her spotlight. And the December rollout makes that painfully clear, because this wasn't just a sneaker tease. It was a reputation rebuild executed without desperation, without theatrics, without shouting, anchored instead in quiet, deliberate signals, the toy drive in Iowa that barely made headlines but spoke volumes, the Team USA commitment that reframed her as a program player rather than a polarizing headline, the hometown commercial shoot that reconnected her with the roots fans first fell in love with. And that's the genius of Nike's approach here, because they didn't try to overpower the narrative. They let Caitlin reshape it herself, organically, authentically, letting the public remember her not as a debate topic but as a basketball player who shows up, gives back, and delivers. And that matters because the so-called Caitlin Clark effect didn't disappear during the 2024 season. It was buried under noise, controversy, and exhaustion, even as she put up Rookie of the Year numbers and dragged Indiana to relevance. But effects don't die, they hibernate. And Nike's entire strategy is built around waking it up at the exact right moment. Not when attention is loudest but when it's cleanest. When fans are ready to receive greatness without distraction. And that's why the comparison to men's signatures completely misses the point. Because LeBron entered a league already designed to monetize him. Zion signed into a machine built to sell him before he ever stepped on the floor. But women's basketball didn't have that machine yet. It's being built right now, in real time, brick by brick, distribution deal by distribution deal. And Caitlin Clark's shoe isn't just entering the market, it's stress testing it, because if this works, if the CC1 launches and sustains, not just spikes, it changes negotiation leverage across the entire WNBA, it strengthens Asia Wilson's position, reframes Breanna Stewart's long-term value, expands Angel Reese's commercial ceiling, and proves to retailers, sponsors, and international partners that women's basketball signatures aren't charity plays or social statements, they're profitable products with global legs, and that's why Nike is giving itself 18 months. Because perfection here isn't optional, it's mandatory, and every Caitlin Clark logo 3 between now and spring 2026 becomes unpaid advertising, every playoff moment becomes narrative fuel. Every clip shared worldwide reinforces the same message embedded in that deceptively simple commercial. There are no limits left to break. And when the shoe finally drops, it won't arrive as merchandise, it will arrive as validation, not just of one athlete's journey from Iowa gyms to global stardom, but of an entire sport's readiness to stand on equal commercial footing. And that's why this wait isn't frustrating, it's foundational. Because Nike isn't launching a product, it's launching proof. And once proof exists, the entire landscape changes forever. The first chapter was about belief, the second chapter is about leverage, and Caitlin Clark has quietly become the most powerful negotiating force women's basketball has ever seen. What Nike is really doing with Caitlin Clark's spring 2026 signature shoe timeline is far more aggressive than patience. It's a calculated accumulation of leverage across every layer of the basketball economy. Because by delaying the retail moment, Nike isn't losing momentum, it's compounding it, allowing every single Caitlin Clark appearance, quote, charity event, Team USA clip, playoff possession, and viral highlight to stack value onto a launch that hasn't even happened yet. And this is where the conversation shifts from branding mythology to hard business reality. Because leverage is what determines whether a signature shoe becomes a one-drop novelty or a decade-long franchise. And Caitlin Clark is being positioned not as a momentary disruptor, but as a structural pillar in Nike's long-term basketball portfolio, which is why the commercials' messaging feels deceptively simple while carrying enormous strategic weight. Because she can make it from anywhere isn't just aspirational language, it's a positioning statement that deliberately refuses to confine her impact to women's basketball, to the WNBA, or even to sport itself. It's Nike saying, without ever saying it, that Caitlin Clark belongs in the same cultural conversation as athletes whose names transcend leagues, demographics, and borders. And that's a radical repositioning when you consider how women's basketball stars have historically been marketed, often boxed into inspirational narratives instead of competitive dominance. But Nike isn't selling inspiration here, it's selling inevitability. The idea that Caitlin's success is not surprising, not miraculous, not conditional, but expected, repeatable, and scalable, and that framing matters because it changes how retailers prepare, how international distributors commit, how marketing departments allocate budgets, and how the league itself plans future growth. And the reason this matters so much right now is because the WNBA is standing at a fragile inflection point, one where visibility has outpaced infrastructure, where attention has arrived faster than monetization systems can support it, and Caitlin Clark's signature shoe is effectively a stress test for whether the league is ready to convert cultural buzz into sustained commercial return. Because star power without product pathways always leads to frustration, fatigue, and eventual disengagement. And we've already seen hints of that during the 2024 season when the conversation around Caitlin became louder than the joy of watching her play. But Nike's approach recognizes that noise is temporary and systems are permanent. And that's why the December rollout wasn't about domination, it was about recalibration. Because while critics were busy debating whether the Caitlin Clark effect had faded, Nike was watching engagement patterns normalize, watching audiences recenter around basketball rather than controversy, watching organic excitement rebuild itself without being force-fed by headlines. And that's the moment you prepare a relaunch, not when attention is at its peak, but when trust is restored. Because trust is what sustains consumer behavior over time. And Caitlin's December presence, Team USA involvement, Iowa Toy Drive's hometown. Visibility wasn't accidental goodwill, it was narrative reinforcement, a reminder that her brand is rooted, not manufactured, and that authenticity is the only currency that survives prolonged exposure, especially in a social media era where audiences instinctively reject anything that feels overly polished or opportunistic. And Nike knows this better than anyone because they've watched hyper-produced athlete campaigns flame out the moment performance dips or public sentiment shifts. But Caitlin Clark's appeal doesn't rely on mystique or distance, it relies on relatability paired with excellence, the sense that she's both extraordinary and accessible, and that duality is incredibly rare. And when you combine that with her playing style, deep-range shooting that looks impossible but feels repeatable, confidence that borders on audacity without tipping into arrogance, you get an athlete whose highlights don't just entertain, they invite participation, they make viewers feel like they understand the game better just by watching her, and that's gold for a brand trying to sell not just shoes, but identity, because people don't buy signature sneakers to honor athletes, they buy them to borrow a piece of what those athletes represent. And Caitlin represents belief without bravado, confidence without separation, ambition without detachment, and Nike's entire strategy is built around amplifying those traits without suffocating them, which is why the absence of technical shoe details right now is so important. Because once you start talking specs, you narrow the conversation, but once you talk belief, you expand it infinitely, and that expansion is critical when you're planning an international rollout, because performance language doesn't always translate across cultures, but confidence does. Swagger does. The visual of someone pulling from distances others wouldn't dare to attempt resonates universally. And Nike is absolutely betting on Caitlin Clark as a global ambassador for women's basketball at a moment when international interest is accelerating faster than domestic systems can adjust, fueled by Olympic exposure, emerging European leagues, and younger audiences consuming basketball through highlights rather than full broadcasts. And Caitlin's game is tailor-made for that ecosystem because it compresses excitement into seconds, into shots that go viral even when viewers don't know the score, the opponent, or the stakes. And that's exactly why Nike is treating this launch like a cinematic franchise rather than a product drop. Because franchises require world building, patience, and consistency, not impulse. And this is also where the comparison to other women's basketball signatures becomes instructive rather than critical. Because Sabrina Ionescu's Nike success proved demand exists, but it also exposed logistical weaknesses, restock delays, uneven availability, missed international opportunities that frustrated consumers and left revenue on the table. And Aya Wilson's ongoing discussions highlight another reality. Sustained investment matters more than initial splash, because a signature shoe doesn't succeed on its first week, it succeeds on its third year, when it still receives marketing support, shelf space, and design evolution, and Nike's delay with Caitlin Clark is a direct response to those lessons, because they know that failing here doesn't just hurt one athlete, it undermines confidence in the entire category. And that's why this shoe carries symbolic weight beyond Caitlin herself, because if the CC1 works, if it sells through, restocks smoothly, expands internationally, and maintains relevance, it becomes a proof of concept that forces the industry to recalibrate how it values women's basketball stars, and that has ripple effects everywhere, from endorsement negotiations to youth participation to media coverage priorities. Because commercial validation changes perception faster than any social argument ever could, and Nike understands that you don't argue markets into existence, you demonstrate them, and Caitlin Clark is their demonstration. And that's why the Spring 2026 launch aligns so perfectly with the league's broader evolution. Because by then expansion teams will be operational, media rights conversations will have matured, and the WNBA will look structurally different than it did during Caitlin's rookie year, more equipped to carry stars without fracturing under the weight of attention. And launching her shoe into that environment isn't cautious, it's opportunistic in the smartest way possible. Because Nike isn't betting on Caitlin alone, it's betting on timing, alignment, and readiness, and that's the difference between chasing relevance and creating it. And when critics ask why fans should wait, the answer is simple but uncomfortable. Because rushing gratification has already cost women's basketball decades of unrealized potential, and this time, the most powerful brand in sports is choosing to get it right instead of getting it fast. and when the CC1 finally hits shelves, it won't just represent Caitlin Clark's journey. It will represent the moment women's basketball proved it could sustain success. Rather than spike at